Welcome to Hangar 51 Files, where history's secrets, classified operations, and hidden truths come to light. From Cold War black ops to the future of warfare, from lost artifacts to emerging defense technologies, we investigate the stories buried beneath official narratives. No speculation, no clickbait, just hard-hitting research, expert analysis, and the pursuit of truth. You're now inside the briefing room. Stay sharp, stay curious. This is Hangar 51 Files.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're venturing into a really fascinating area, the hidden history of anti-gravity technology. You, our listener, you've got this great knack for soaking up information, and you love those aha moments, so well, get ready.
Yeah, we've been digging into the material you sent over, Edoardo Giglio's Gravity Shadow. It's quite a manuscript. It really spans centuries of looking into this stuff.
Some surprising discoveries in there, too.
Definitely. And just this ongoing human fascination with, defying gravity.
Exactly. So our mission today is to unpack this history, look at the key people, the different scientific ideas, the implications maybe.
Right. And try to keep it clear, avoid just drowning in details.
Okay, so where does this story really start? Because anti-gravity sounds pretty modern, but Giglio takes us way back, doesn't he?
He really does. Starts with Leonardo da Vinci, believe it or not, around 1505.
Da Vinci, wow.
Yeah, in his Codex Arundel. There are these often overlooked experiments. Giglio points out that da Vinci was basically showing gravity as an accelerant.
How did he do that back then?
Well, it sounds like he did these meticulous experiments, like pouring sand and timing it, essentially figuring out that falling objects speed up. This is centuries before Newton formally defined it.
That's incredible. And his famous mirrored writing, was that just for secrecy?
Giglio suggests it was probably both. Secrecy, sure, but also practical. He was left-handed, so it stopped him smudging the ink.
Huh. Fits the hidden history theme already.
It does. Then the book jumps forward quite a bit to the early 20th century. Another really interesting figure comes up.
Thomas Townsend Brown.
That's the one. He was working at Caltech initially.
Right. The guy who thought gravity might be a push, not just a pull. Kind of an unusual idea.
Very. And his first experiments trying to, well, manipulate gravity with electricity didn't exactly win over the establishment.
But Giglio paints him as more than just an amateur physicist, right?
Oh, yeah. He had some serious inventions early on. Electrified fence, walkie-talkies even. And get this, a radio station he set up at Denison University, WJD. It supposedly reached California, even Germany. And that caught the eye of military intelligence.
Military intelligence looking at a college radio station in the 20s.
Right.
Okay, that's intriguing.
Right. And then there's his observation with Coolidge X-ray tubes. That seems key.
What exactly did he see there?
Well, this is where his persistence comes in. He noticed this subtle but consistent force. Inside a vacuum tube with high voltage, there was a thrust from the negative electrode towards the positive one.
A thrust from just electricity in a vacuum.
Yeah, and even stranger, he reported that the mass of the whole tube seemed to change slightly depending on how it was oriented.
Whoa, that sounds like it's interacting with gravity or inertia directly.
That's what he thought. It's a huge claim.
So his time at Denison University sounds important, but maybe short-lived.
It was. He was key in getting WJD running, showed his practical skills. Giglio notes Denison doesn't really shout about him now, though.
Interesting.
He left fairly quickly, but crucially, that's where he met Dr. Alfred Biefeld.
Ah, and that leads to the Biefeld-Brown effect.
Exactly. Which, bizarrely enough, is the principle behind things like those sharper image bladeless fans.
No way, that ionic wind thing.
That's it. Brown documented it first, using electricity to move air without moving parts. MIT even flew a small plane with it recently, back in 2018.
So he wasn't just theorizing, he patented this.
Yep, 1927, method of producing force or motion. And he wrote about his gravitator, no propellers, no gears, in Science and Invention magazine in 1929.
So let me get this straight for the listener. Brown basically found that by charging up a capacitor, like really high voltage, he could create a force. A push.
A push that seemed to act against gravity, or at least independent of normal proportion.
That fundamentally challenges how we think about gravity, doesn't it? Just a pull. Maybe not.
That's the core aha moment with Brown, why his work was so interesting and maybe why it became so, well, sensitive.
Which is probably when the military got really interested.
You got it.
Yeah.
He enlisted in the Navy. His research goes under the umbrella of national defense. Giglio talks about experiments with these asymmetrical capacitors.
What were they doing?
He put them on a circular track, and apparently they moved. Without any obvious push or pull, just a high voltage applied. seemed to defy physics as it was understood then.
So aircraft propulsion, maybe even radar evasion.
He was working with government agencies on exactly those kinds of things.
Then World War II kicks in, things get even murkier, delivering gold, building a sidereal radiation recorder. What was that about?
Well, the specifics are, likely still classified. The gold run on the USS Nashville in '38, the recorder project at Penn in '39, those happened.
And the connection to anti-gravity.
It's speculative, Giglio admits. But his association with William Stephenson Churchill's spy chief, Intrepid, who was known for scooping up advanced patents, it suggests layers.
And then this mission into Germany in 1945, right at the end of the war, sounds incredibly risky for a quote-unquote amateur.
Extremely. Giglio lists possibilities, maybe German codes, maybe investigating those Foo Fighters pilots kept reporting.
Luminous objects acting intelligently.
Right. Or maybe investigating the rumored Nazi superweapon, Die Glock, the Bell, said to manipulate space-time.
Die Glock. We'll definitely need to circle back to that.
Absolutely. And the fact that Brown got injured on this mission and needed rescuing shows it was serious business.
There's this quote comparing Brown to Oppenheimer, but for black projects. That really reframes him, doesn't it?
Completely. Suddenly, he's not just an eccentric inventor. He's potentially central to this hidden world of technology.
And after the war, this anti-gravity gold rush starts.
Yeah, the military was pouring money into advanced propulsion. Brown's work was apparently part of that mix. But Giglio suggests Brown had ethical struggles with the military applications.
Then there's the whole NICAP thing. He co-founds this public UFO group.
Only to get pushed out later. It's a weird turn.
Why? What happened there?
Well, the suspicion, according to Giglio, was that maybe Brown was trying to use NICAP to push his anti-gravity ideas more publicly.
And that didn't sit well with others. Or the government.
Possibly. Plus, there were worries inside NICAP itself about CIA infiltration concerns that eventually led to the group falling apart. It just highlights this tangled web. UFOs, anti-gravity, government secrecy.
So 1957 seems important. He leaves NICAP, goes to this Gravity Research Foundation conference.
Giglio sees that year as a turning point, where anti-gravity research really starts to disappear into the classified world, the black projects, funded by government and increasingly private industry.
And Brown, having been this public UFO figure,
gets pulled back into the shadows, it seems.
Could he have been set up as a kind of fall guy, his amateur label, theories dismissed by mainstream physics?
It's a plausible idea Giglio raises. Having a public face associated with this, someone easily dismissed if needed, if it's a pattern.
Especially if he started clashing with the military-industrial complex later on. He wanted more openness.
Right. By the early 60s, Giglio says Brown was pushing for open research, which likely didn't endear him to those holding the secrets.
And he kept experimenting, disc-shaped craft, still facing skepticism.
He kept at it, and he kept talking about this link between gravity and electromagnetism.
Which echoes Tesla, doesn't it?
It does. It's fascinating how different people seem to be sensing a connection there, even if they couldn't fully prove it. Brown, with his electrical effects creating thrust, stumbled onto something related, maybe?
He dies in '85. Becomes this kind of mythic figure. But the big question remains, did the military actually use his stuff?
Impossible to say for sure given the secrecy. But Giglio points to hints. Later research by people like Podkletnov, the development of metamaterials.
And maybe even the B-2 bomber, the stealth aspect.
Possibly. The idea that charging the wings using that ionic wind principle on a huge scale could contribute to lift and stealth.
Yeah.
It traces right back to Brown.
Wow, his quote is powerful. The universe is not a prison, it is a playground.
If only we have the courage to see it.
Yeah.
Sums him up well.
Okay, let's shift gears to another giant looming in this story. Nikola Tesla.
Ah, Tesla. Yeah, Giglio paints this picture of him in his last days, January 1943, alone in the New Yorker hotel.
Quite eccentric by then, right? Obsessed with numbers.
Definitely. The 3-6-9 obsession is famous. Giglio briefly touches on his incredible earlier achievements. AC power, radio, Niagara Falls.
Fluorescent lights.
Right. But contrasts it with his later business problems and, well, isolation.
And when he died, the government swooped in immediately. The Office of Alien Property.
Yeah, that's a key point. They seized everything, despite his nephew protesting. And apparently there was a notebook specifically marked government.
They never released a full inventory of what they took, did they?
Nope. Over 40 boxes were examined, but the full contents, still unknown, which of course fuels endless speculation.
Especially when you compare it to the official review by Dr. John G. Trump. He basically dismissed Tesla's later work.
Called it speculative, yeah. Giglio juxtaposes that sharply with the CIA and Air Force much later, in '92, admitting Tesla's papers held significant commercial and military value.
Almost 50 years later. So the initial dismissal looks like damage control.
Or strategic classification, keeping a lid on whatever they found valuable.
And Tesla always had this grand vision, right? Harnessing Earth's energy, Wardenclyffe Tower.
Absolutely. Wireless energy transmission for the world. Wardenclyffe failed financially, but the vision was huge. He saw the Earth itself as almost alive, a huge brain, he called it.
And he thought gravity was tied into that, something you could potentially manipulate.
He viewed it as a side effect of the Earth's energy fields. So, yeah, in theory, manipulable.
So did Tesla actually crack antigravity?
Giglio leaves it as a question. No hard proof of a working device from Tesla himself. But his theories on electrogravitics, his deep dives into electromagnetic fields, they likely laid groundwork.
And the government studying his papers after his death, mixing them with captured Nazi research. That hints they saw something important there.
Exactly. It suggests his ideas were taken very seriously behind closed doors.
Which brings us neatly, or perhaps ominously, to the Nazis and Die Glock, the bell. This sounds like pure sci-fi.
It really does. Giglio introduces it via a British commando operation, Little Foxley, targeting a high-ranking Nazi named Hans Kammler.
Kammler, his background is chilling. SS, involved with concentration camps, but also oversaw advanced tech. V-2 rockets, the Horton Flying Wing.
Yeah, he wasn't just a bureaucrat. He had his own elite research division, the Sonderstab Kammler, developing top-secret black projects.
Based in that underground complex in Poland, Duris.
The Giant, yeah. Built by slave labor from Gross Rosenkamp.
Yeah.
And supposedly, deep inside was Die Glock.
Describe this thing. What did it supposedly look like?
Bell-shaped, about 12 feet high, 9 feet across. Inside, 2 cylinders counter-rotating, filled with this violet metallic liquid called Zerum 525, apparently highly radioactive.
And its purpose? Anti-gravity.
That's the main speculation. Accounts, though mostly anecdotal and hard to verify, talk about it hovering, glowing blue, vibrating intensely.
Even reports of weirder effects. Levitation nearby, plants liquefying, time distortion.
Yeah, the stories get pretty wild. Weight loss in objects, animal deaths, messing with time itself.
Okay, gotta ask, what are the more, let's say, grounded explanations?
Skeptics suggest maybe a high-speed centrifuge for isotope separation or some kind of particle accelerator for nuclear research. Kammler was linked to ideas about a rocket-propelled atomic bomb.
And then there are the really fringe theories connecting it to Nazi occultism, the Vril Society.
Right, which pushes it further into legend territory. The big problem is the lack of documents. Most researchers supposedly died, maybe from radiation.
And Kammler himself, what happened to him?
Vanished. Officially suicide in 45 or 47, maybe escaped to South America. His body was never found. Both the US and Soviets desperately wanted him, or his knowledge. There are even rumors von Braun hid some research for him.
So much mystery. How does this connect to the whole UAP phenomenon and the idea of false flags?
Giglio draws a line connecting anti-gravity research, UAP sightings, and government cover-ups. He argues this isn't new research, and sightings go back over a century.
And governments using UFOs as a cover story.
There's declassified evidence suggesting they've certainly considered it, or done it, using the public fascination as a kind of counterintelligence tool.
Like the U-2 spy plane tests in the 50s, over Area 51.
Perfect example. High-flying, shiny plane seen at dusk. People reported UFOs. The Air Force investigated, but it provided perfect cover for the classified U-2 flights.
Until Gary Powers got shot down and they had to admit it.
Exactly. He shows the strategy worked, for a while. Area 51 became linked with aliens, conveniently hiding the real secret advanced spy planes.
Even earlier, the Battle of Los Angeles in 1942, just nerves after Pearl Harbor.
Mostly, yeah. But Giglio suggests officials saw how readily the public jumped to extraordinary explanations. And Hollywood movies fueled the UFO craze, which probably helped counterintelligence, too.
So Operation Blue Book, the Air Force UFO investigations,
ran from 47 to 69. Officially inconclusive, mostly explained sightings. But the context is interesting.
Especially the timing with NCAP, Brown's group, starting in 56, and the first gravity conference in 57.
Giglio definitely highlights that timing. NCAP starts up right as the U-2 is flying, then the gravity conference. And later, the suspicions about CIA infiltration leading to NCAP's end. It all feels connected.
Using UFOs seems almost mild compared to things like Operation Northwoods, planning fake attacks.
Right, but then we see this shift, More recently, from UFOs, unidentified flying objects, to UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena.
More serious, less little green men, like the 2004 Tic Tac incident.
Exactly. Navy pilots encountering something that moves in ways physics as we know it shouldn't allow, revealed years later via a FLIR system update.
And now the government is disclosing more. Congressional hearings, the Pentagon talking about ATIP.
There's definitely been a shift towards more public acknowledgement, though a lot still happens behind closed doors.
Then those drone swarms in late 2024 off the East Coast. The official silence, then the vague for research explanation.
Giglio points to that as a recent example fitting the historical pattern. Anomalous behavior night flight, restricted areas, impossible maneuvers, affecting other drones, and official reluctance to share info.
So the big question Giglio raises, are UAPs a way to distract from or discredit real anti-gravity research? Or are they maybe evidence of that research being kept secret?
It's the core dilemma, isn't it? The ambiguity serves secrecy well. It makes serious study harder, while also potentially hiding breakthroughs.
Let's talk about the Cold War race, not just rockets, but maybe anti-gravity tech too. Operation Paperclip brought von Braun here.
And the Soviets had Operation Ossowaviankim, which was actually much bigger. They took over 2,500 German scientists and technicians.
So both sides were scrambling for that Nazi technology.
Absolutely. And anti-gravity, if real, would be the ultimate prize. Radar-proof planes, super weapons, space travel, a massive power shift.
The Soviets got ahead early in space. Sputnik, Laika, landing on Venus.
They did. And Giglio mentions these rumors of Soviet programs studying crashed UFOs, the Setka program, experiments with rotating superconductors.
Could that have fueled their advances, maybe even their hypersonic missiles now?
It's speculative, but Giglio suggests their early focus on unconventional areas, maybe informed by captured research or UAP studies, could have given them an edge. The U.S. only recently seems to be catching up on hypersonics.
And then, in the early 90s, you have Eugene Podkletnov, a Russian scientist.
Working in Finland, actually. He publishes this paper claiming he measured gravity reduction above a spinning superconducting disk.
That must have caused a stir.
Oh, yeah. NASA got interested, defense contractors too. Suddenly, anti-gravity seemed maybe, just maybe, experimentally achievable. Even after the Soviet Union fell, that thread continued.
Which leads to the chapter, Material Science equals Anti-Gravity. That's bold. Let's unpack Podkletnov's experiment.
Okay, so early 90s, Finland. Podkletnov, a material scientist, is working with superconductors materials cooled way down near absolute zero, where electricity flows with zero resistance.
Right, very exotic state of matter.
He spins a superconducting disk very fast in a magnetic field and claims he measures a reduction in the weight of objects placed above it, up to 2%.
2% doesn't sound huge, but for gravity.
It's revolutionary, if true. Imagine reducing weight for launch vehicles, aircraft. The implications are massive. He published in Physica C in 1992.
But trying to replicate it proved difficult.
Very. Results were mixed, inconsistent. NASA spent about $1 million testing similar setups, found some unique properties, but no definitive gravity shield.
People raised doubts, experimental errors, air currents.
All the usual scientific critiques. And Podkletnov himself, well, he was confident but wasn't very open with his exact methods, refused to share blueprints. That didn't help.
Then his follow-up paper got withdrawn under mysterious circumstances.
Yeah, in 1996. Rumors flew government intervention. Aerospace companies wanting it kept quiet. He largely withdrew from the public eye after that.
So visionary or something else?
Hard to say. But his work forced people to seriously consider manipulating gravity again. Giglio mentions classified projects popping up in the U.S. and Europe right after, looking into advanced propulsion, DARPA funding rumors, BAE Systems Project Green Glow.
Even Hal Puthoff, known for zero-point energy research, was interested.
Yeah, saw a potential link. And Podkletnov didn't disappear entirely. In a 2020 interview, he claimed he'd achieved similar effects at room temperature using thin gold layers, creating repulsion or attraction.
Still working on it 30 years later. And the core idea, gravitomagnetism, seems to be getting more attention now.
It does. Other researchers like Martin Tajmar have done related experiments. Private companies like Boeing and Lockheed Martin are definitely interested in advanced propulsion. NASA's looked at it again.
And the materials science angle. Metamaterials, quasicrystals.
Giglio suggests Podkletnov's work spurred interest in exotic materials that might interact with spacetime or gravity in weird ways. Quasicrystals even got mentioned in that 2024 congressional hearing about DoD fraud.
Whoa, really? Connecting fraud to secret anti-gravity tech.
And that hearing supposedly mentioned Podkletnov. Plus, Giglio brings up that declassified 71 Australian memo about the CIA wanting UFOs debunked to cover up their own anti-gravity craft.
And whistleblower claims, like Sergeant Fuchs talking about Groom Lake, quasicrystals, a secret space fleet.
Yeah, lots of controversial, unverified claims out there. But Giglio points out the pattern. NASA workshops on breakthrough propulsion in the 90s, talking warp drives, vacuum energy, and specifically gravity shielding, with superconductors directly related to Podkletnov.
It's a persistent theme, even if shrouded in secrecy and speculation.
Exactly. The smoke suggests there might be some fire somewhere in the classified world.
Okay, let's move to the Chinese connection. Dr. Ning Li. Her obituary called her a world leader in superconducting anti-gravity. That's a huge claim.
It is. Yet, as Giglio notes, her death in 2021 was relatively quiet, considering the potential importance of her work, especially with high-temperature superconductors, HDSDs. Much easier to work with than Podkletnov's near absolute zero stuff.
Tell us about her background. Came from China, ended up in Huntsville, Alabama, Rocket City.
Right. Physics degree from Peking University, immigrated, worked at the University of Alabama in Huntsville. Her focus was also on gravitomagnetism, like we discussed. Einstein predicted it, this sort of gravitational equivalent of magnetism.
Her goal was an impossible machine, a force field generator.
That's how she described it. Using rotating superconductors, she theorized you could create strong gravitomagnetic fields, basically warping space-time locally. Potential for propulsion, maybe even earthquake prevention.
Yeah. She claims she actually suspended a bowling ball with it in Popular Mechanics.
That claim definitely got attention. And it attracted the U.S. Department of Defense in the early 90s. They're always looking for disruptive tech.
Her early experiments showed small effects.
Slight changes in gravitational forces, apparently. Enough to get serious funding and interest. By the mid-90s, she was talking about spacecraft needing no fuel, changing direction instantly.
Beyond Newton.
Exactly. Which naturally interested defense and intelligence circles.
And then things got secret. She left the university, started her own company.
Antigravity LLC, founded in 1999, got almost $500,000 in DoD funding to refine her theories. But what happened inside Antigravity? Very little public information.
Cue the conspiracy theories.
Naturally. Breakthroughs hidden. Links to UAPs. And major aerospace companies were likely watching very closely, maybe investing. Privatization of potential breakthroughs.
Her son mentioned her extreme secrecy, telling him to forget anything he might think he knew.
Yeah, that quote Giglio includes is chilling. Shows the pressure she was under.
Even though she passed away, her theoretical work might still be influential.
Giglio suggests so. Her ideas touch on gravitomagnetism, quantum mechanics, materials science, things still being actively researched, maybe related to negative mass concepts or work by Boeing or Lockheed's Skunk Works.
Luis Elizondo from the Pentagon UAP program has hinted at propulsion involving manipulating space-time. Could that connect to Lee's work?
It's a tantalizing possibility. Her journey really symbolizes that shift from open university research to classified, possibly privatized projects.
And the China connection. Did her theories go back?
Unknown. But Giglio mentions she was apparently courted by Chinese scientists later in her career. Then there was the tragic car accident in 2010 where her husband died and she was severely injured.
Developed Alzheimer's later, died in 2021. A very sad end.
It is. And it leaves her legacy shrouded. Was she on the verge of something huge? Did she achieve it in secret? What might have happened if her work stayed in the open? Big questions.
So we've got all these different threads. Newton's apple formalizes gravity, but even Einstein couldn't fully square it with quantum mechanics. It's still mysterious.
Right. If gravity itself is hard to fully grasp, how do you tackle anti-gravity?
Giglio emphasizes the different approaches people took, right? Da Vinci, Tesla, Brown.
Yeah, and he distinguishes between true anti-gravity, canceling gravity out entirely, and what most researchers seem to have aimed for, manipulating gravitational or inertial effects, making something lighter, producing thrust without conventional means.
Not aerodynamic lift, not rocket thrust, something different.
Exactly. So you have Tesla thinking electromagnetism was the key. Brown with his high-voltage capacitors creating force, the Biefeld-Brown effect, Podkletnov with superconductors for gravity shielding, Ning Li using rotating superconductors for gravitoelectrics.
All different theories, all aiming at controlling gravity somehow.
And because we still lack that complete theory of quantum gravity, there's theoretical room to experiment. Despite skepticism, the research persists.
And most of them reported some effect, even small weight reductions.
That's the intriguing pattern. Tiny percentages, but if you could scale that up reliably, It changes everything: medical, military, space, energy.
But no conclusive proof of actually negating gravity yet?
Not publicly, no. Lots of progress and manipulation, maybe, but true negation remains elusive, as far as we know.
Okay, the final chapter. How to disappear completely. This gets into suppressed technology territory.
Yeah, Giglio looks at the allure of these stories, the immortal light bulb, hidden cures, and often connects them to, well, corporate greed or just bad business decisions, like Kodak missing digital photography, or Xerox and the GUI.
And figures like Tesla get attached to these ideas, earthquake machines, death rays.
His belief in free energy and his fights with corporations make him a perfect candidate for suppressed tech narratives. His ideas about using electricity to affect gravity fit right in, and the government grabbing his papers fuels it.
Giglio argues the U.S. system itself might hinder breakthroughs getting into the public domain because of IP battles, corporate secrecy.
It's a point he raises: the focus on patents, keeping things proprietary, the rise of private LLCs for sensitive research like Ning Lai's Antigravity, Delaware corporations known for secrecy.
Military secrecy is another layer, Manhattan Project style.
Or modern examples like Boeing's X-37B spaceplane. Flies for years, secret payloads, highly advanced reusable tech, but we know very little about what it actually does.
So how do we tell real breakthroughs from hype or fraud in this anti-gravity field? It seems rife with controversy.
It's incredibly difficult. Giglio mentions that Ponzi scheme guy in early 2025 who claimed anti-gravity but was just scamming investors. But then again, sometimes seemingly impossible things turn out real. He uses the old analogy of the farmer inventing a supercarburetor.
And the M drive, that impossible space drive.
Big controversy there. Yeah. Violates known physics, mostly debunked by mainstream science. But then, in March 2025, Giglio notes a former NASA scientist claims to have reincarnated it, proposing a new force expelling mass to create thrust.
So extraordinary claims need serious study, but don't dismiss them out of hand.
That seems to be the takeaway. We can't declare gravity conquered yet, but the pattern Giglio highlights is important. Brilliant people challenging gravity often face ridicule, or worse. Brown, Tesla, Lee, Podkletnov, maybe even the M-drive inventor.
It's quite a deep dive we've taken then. Centuries of this hidden history, from Da Vinci looking at sand falling to today's classified projects.
Really have. I think the key things to pull out are this relentless human drive to beat gravity, the sheer variety of scientific ideas people have chased,
The heavy involvement of governments and private companies, usually wrapped in secrecy.
and that constant tension between real science, wild speculation, and maybe even deliberate deception. It's a messy field.
Definitely leaves you thinking. So much we don't know for sure.
Absolutely. Which brings us to a final thought for our listener. Giglio raises this provocative idea. Think about strategic deception, like the Star Wars Missile Defense Initiative during the Cold War. Was it real? Or just a way to make the Soviets spend themselves into oblivion chasing it?
Okay, so apply that here.
Could this whole enduring fascination with anti-gravity, the hints, the rumors, the dead ends, could it be a long game? A way to keep rivals chasing shadows, spending resources on a technological wild goose chase?
Or is it the slow, quiet burn of something truly revolutionary that's about to break through?
Exactly. Is it a grand deception or the cusp of revelation? Something to ponder.
A perfect place to leave it. We definitely encourage everyone listening to dig deeper into these figures and ideas. It's a story with many layers left to explore. Thanks for taking the deep dive with us.
That's it for this episode of Hangar 51 Files, where we uncover the hidden, investigate the unexplained, and challenge the official story. If you found this episode insightful, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with those who refuse to accept surface-level narratives. For more deep dives, exclusive research, and behind-the-scenes content, visit www.hangar51files.com, our YouTube channel, at Hangar51Files, or our Substack, hangar51files.substack.com. Until next time, stay sharp, stay curious, and keep questioning everything. This is Hangar 51 Files, signing off. No speculation, no clickbait, just hard-hitting research, expert analysis, and the pursuit of truth.